Morning, everybody. This is Jeremiah with Man with the Mug, and I'm really glad you're here. It is 4 a.m. I'm up early. Um, I ran a Spartan race over the weekend, as you can see, with my shirt that I'm very humbly wearing because I'm just glad I got the shirt. But yeah, I went to bed very early last night because I was just so tired. And excuse me, both my wife and I went to bed really early. We were both just very exhausted. Um, Me from the Spartan race and she because she's pregnant. So I don't blame her at all. We yeah, went to bed really early, and I tend to I've had some sleep issues for a couple of years. It's not that I have a problem falling asleep. I'll usually fall asleep really quickly. Um, but I'll just wake up throughout the night. And I'm trying to think if tonight was one of those nights. I woke up at a time I normally wake up, which is about 2 a.m. But I went to bed at like 8. So I got a full 6 hours of sleep. I normally can get about 5 to 6 hours straight. And then after that, I'm still staying in bed, usually until 8 or 9 hours, just to make sure I'm trying to get more sleep. But it's usually in and out after I wake up at 5 or 6 hours afterwards. Um, so that was one of those nights. But because I went to bed very early, my body woke up, normally after 5 or 6 hours and said, "Okay, we're up." I said, "No, we're not. It's 2 a.m." My body said, "Nope, you're up." So here we are. We're gonna do some more Walden today. I'm gonna pick up where we left off. He was last episode was doing hard things, and he was going to talk about the cost of building his house and the effort it took in which to do that. And then also talking about the difference between like the university student who's really exploring life conceptually or abstractly through um, academia versus the person who gets out and actually does the thing in which the student is studying. And he argues in the favor of the person who's actually doing the thing rather than studying the thing. I tend to agree. But we're going to pick back up. He's talking about universities at this point. On that note, as with our colleges, so with 100 modern improvements, there's an illusion about them. There's not always a positive advance. The devil goes on exacting compound interest to the last for his early share and numerous succeeding investments in them. Our inventions are wont to be pretty toys, which distract our attention from serious things. They were but improved means to an unimproved end, an end which was already but too easy to arrive at. I feel like I keep licking my lips, but got a lot of saliva in there. I'm trying to get it down so I don't just start slurring my words or choking. uh, they are but improved means to an unimproved end, an end which was already but too easy to arrive at. As railroads lead to Boston or New York, we are in a great haste to construct a magnetic telegraph from Maine to Texas. But Maine and Texas, it may be, have nothing important to communicate. Either is in such a predicament as the man who was earnest to be introduced to a distinguished deaf woman, but when he was presented, and one end of her ear trumpet was put into his hand, had nothing to say, as if the main object were to talk fast and not to talk sensibly. We are eager to tunnel under the Atlantic and bring the old world some weeks nearer to the new. But perchance the first news that will leak through into the broad flapping American ear will be that Princess Adelaide has the whooping cough. After all, the man whose horse trots a mile a minute does not carry the most important messages. He is not an evangelist, nor does he come around eating locust and wild honey. I doubt if flying childers ever carried a peck of corn to mill. One says to me, I wonder that you do not lay up money. You love to travel. You might take the cars and go to Fitchburg today and see the country. But I am wiser than that. I have learned that the swiftest traveler is he that goes afoot. I say to my friends, suppose we try who will get there first. The distance is 30 miles, the fare 90 cents. That is almost a day's wages. I remember when wages were 60 cents a day for laborers on this very road. Well, I start now on foot and get there before night. I have traveled at that rate by the week, together. You will, in the meanwhile, have earned your fare and arrive there sometime tomorrow, or possibly this evening, if you are lucky enough to get a job in season. Instead of going to Fitchburg, you will be working here the greater part of the day. And so, if the railroad reached around the world, I think I should keep ahead of you. And as for seeing the country and getting experience of that kind, I should have to cut your acquaintance altogether. Such is the universal law, which no man can ever outwit. And with regard to the railroad, even we may say it is as broad as it is long. To make a railroad round the world available to all mankind, is equivalent to grading the whole surface of the planet. Men have an indistinct notion that if they keep up this activity of joint stocks and spades long enough, all will at length ride somewhere in next to no time and for nothing. But though a crowd rushes to the depot and the conductor shouts, "All aboard!" when the smoke is blown away and the vapor condensed, it will be perceived that a few are riding, but the rest are run over, and it will be called and will be a melancholy accident. No doubt they can ride at last, who shall have earned their fare. That is if they survive so long. But they will probably have lost their elasticity and desire to travel by that time. This spending of the best part of one's life earning money in order to enjoy a questionable liberty during the least valuable part of it reminds me of the Englishman who went to India to make a fortune first, in order that he might return to England. In order that he might return to England and live the life of a poet. He should have gone up the garret at once. What? Exclaim a million Irishmen starting up from all the shanties in the land. Is not this railroad which we have built a good thing? Yes, I answer, comparatively good, that is. You might have done worse. But I wish, as you are brothers of mine, that you could have spent your time better than digging in this dirt. Before I finished my house, wishing to earn $10 or $12 by some honest and agreeable method, in order to meet my unusual expenses, I planted about 2 acres and a half of light and sandy soil, near it chiefly with beans, but also a small part with potatoes, corns, corns, corn, excuse me, peas, and turnips. The whole lot contains 11 acres, mostly growing up to pines and hickories, and was sold the preceding season for $8.08 an acre. One farmer said that it was good for nothing but to raise cheeping squirrels on. I put no manure whatever on this land, not being the owner, but merely a squatter, and not expecting to cultivate so much again, and I did not quite hoe it all at once. I got out several cords of stumps and plowing, which supplied me fuel, which supplied me with fuel for a long time, excuse me, and left small circles of virgin mold, easily distinguishable through the summer by the greater luxuriance of the beans there. The dead and for the most part unmerchantable wood behind my house, and the driftwood from the pond, have supplied the remainder of my fuel. I was obliged to hire a team and a man for the plowing, though I held the plow myself. My farm outgoes, yeah, my farm outgoes for the first season were, for implements, seed, work, etc., $14.72 and a half. The seed corn. Wow, it's tough to say. Say that 5 times fast. Seed corn, seed corn, seed corn. Seed corn. You got milk? Seed corn. Thank you for bearing with me. The seed corn was the seed corn was given me. It's a tough sentence to say, especially at the pace I tend to read. This never costs anything to speak of, unless you plant more than enough. I got 12 bushels of beans and 18 bushels of potatoes, besides some peas and sweet corn. The yellow corn and turnips were too late to come to anything. My whole income from the farm was, deducting the outgoes, eight, yeah, deducting numbers, there's a subtraction equation on the page, there are left $8.71 and a half, besides produce consumed then on one hand at the time. This estimate was made of the value of $4.50, the amount on hand much more than balancing a little grass which I did not raise. All things considered, that is, considering the importance of a man's soul and of today, notwithstanding the short time occupied by my experiment, nay, partly even because of its transient character, I believe that was doing better than any farmer in Concord did that year. The next year I did better still, for I spaded up all the land which I required, about a third of an acre, and I learned from the experience of both years, not being in the least awed by many celebrated works on husbandry, Arthur Young among the rest, that if one would live simply and eat only the crop which he raised, and raise no more than he ate, and not exchange it for an insufficient quantity of more luxurious and expensive things, he would need to cultivate only a few rods of ground. Excuse me. And that it would be cheaper to spade up than to use the oxen to plow it, and to select a fresh spot from time to time, than to manure the old, and he could do all his necessary farm work, as it were with his left hand, at odd hours in the summer. And thus he would not be tied to an ox or horse or cow or pig as at present. I desire to speak impartially at this point, and not one interested in the success or failure of the present economical and social arrangements. I was more independent than any farmer in Concord, for I was not anchored to a house or farm, but could follow out the best of my genius, which is a very crooked one every moment. Beside being better off than already. Beside being better off than they already. If my house had been burned or my crops had failed, I should have been nearly, as well off as before. I want to think that men are not so much the keepers of herds as herds are the keepers of men. The former are so much the freer. Men and oxygen, men and oxygen, men and oxen exchange work. But if we consider necessary work only, the oxen will be seen to have greatly the advantage. Their farm is so much the larger. Man does some of his part of the exchange work in his 6 weeks of haying, and it is no boy's play. Certainly no nation that lived simply in all respects, that is, no nation of philosophers, would commit so great a blunder as to use the labor of animals. True, there never was and is not likely soon to be a nation of philosophers, nor am I certain it is desirable that there should be. However, I should never have broken a horse or bull and taken him to board for any work he might do for me, for fear I should become a horseman or a herdsman merely, and a society seems to be the gainer by so doing. As are we certain that what is one man's gain, if not another's loss, and that the stable boy has equal cause with his master to be satisfied? Granted that some public works would have not been constructed without this aid, and let man share the glory of such with an ox and a horse. Does it follow that he could have not accomplished works yet more worth? That was a weird sentence. Does it follow that he could not have accomplished works yet more worthy of himself in that case? When men begin to do, not merely unnecessarily, not merely unnecessary or artistic, excuse me, but luxurious and idle work with their assistance, it is inevitable that a few do all the exchange work with the oxen, or in other words, become the slaves of the strongest. Man thus not only works for the animal within him, but for a symbol of this, he works for the animal without him. Though we have many substantial houses of brick or stone, excuse me, the prosperity of the farmer is still measured by the degree to which the barn overshadows the house. This town is said to have the largest houses for oxen, cows, and horses hereabouts, and it is not behindhand in its public buildings, but there are very few halls for free worship or free speech in this country. It should not have been by their architecture, but why not even by their power of abstract thought, that nations should seek to commemorate themselves? How much more admirable the Bhagavad Gita than all the ruins of the East? Towers and temples are the luxury of princes. A simple and independent mind does not toil at the bidding of any prince. Genius is not a retainer to any emperor, nor is its material silver or gold, or marble, except to a trifling extent. To what end, pray, is so much stone hammered? In Arcadia, when I was there, I did not see any hammering stone. Nations are possessed with an insane ambition to perpetuate the memory of themselves by the amount of hammered stone they leave. What if equal pains were taken to smooth and polish their manners? One piece of good sense would be more memorable than a monument as high as the moon. I love better to see the stones in place. The grandeur of Thebes was a vulgar grandeur. More sensible is a rod of stone wall that bounds an honest man's field than 100 gated Thebes that has wandered farther from the true end of life. The religion and civilization, which are barbaric and heathenish, built splendid temples, but what you might call Christianity does not. Most of the stone nation hammers goes toward its tomb only. It buries itself alive. As for the pyramids, there is nothing to wonder at in them, so much as the fact that so many men could be found degraded enough to spend their lives constructed to. I was stumbling. I was stumbling over that one. It's almost like I tripped and I was still walking forward, but I kept trying to catch myself before I actually fell down. That was the last couple seconds. The religion. That's not where I started. As for the pyramids, there is nothing to wonder at in them so much as the fact that so many men could be found degraded enough to spend their lives constructing a tomb for some ambitious booby, whom it would have been wiser and manlier to have drowned in the Nile, and then given his body to the dogs. I might possibly invent some excuse for them and him, but I have no time for it. As for the religion and love of art of the builders, it is much the same all the world over. Whether the building be an Egyptian temple or the United States Bank, it costs more than it comes to. The mainspring is vanity, assisted by the love of garlic and bread and butter. Mr. Balcom, a promising young architect, designs it on the back of his Vitruvius with hard pencil and ruler, and the job is let out to Dobson and Sons, stonecutters. When the 30 centuries begin to look down on it, mankind begins to look up at it. And as for your high towers and monuments, there was a crazy fellow once in this town who undertook to dig through to China. And he got so far that, as he said, he heard the Chinese pots and kettles rattle, that I think I shall not go out of my way to admire the hole which he made. Many are concerned about the monuments of the West and the East, to know who built them. Excuse me. For my part, I should like to know who in those days did not build them, who were above such trifling. But to proceed with my statistics, which I will actually not do, I'm going to stop right here because that's a total shift in topic. Man, I love the quote: "One piece of good sense would be more memorable than a monument as high as the moon." One piece of good sense. I think I'm going to make that the title of this video. I don't know if I have a lot to say on it, honestly, because I'm still trying to work on my good sense. Common sense is a term that I think can hold different definition depending on where you are and where you live. Where I live, in the context that I see common sense is just things you don't need to have said. Good manners, consideration of others before yourself, um, and a general goodwill towards men. I would just say that. Um, but one piece of good sense is more memorable than a monument made to the moon. I don't know if I quite that right. One piece of good sense will be more memorable than a monument as high as the moon. Man, that's a quote. That's a quote for the ages. I want to memorize that. I just want to keep that as kind of a life quote. One piece of good sense worth more than a monument as high as the moon. All of men's accomplishments, all of humanity's civilizations that we built, the empires that rose and fell, excuse me. And one piece of good sense is worth more than all of that. It kind of reminds me of Diogenes, the story of Diogenes from ancient times. Alexander the Great was, I think it was a procession through a town, and there was a philosopher named Diogenes there, and he was just sitting there. And Alexander the Great, I think, I'm gonna misquote this. Just remember the concept. So those of you who are super into this, don't come at me. But Alexander the Great, I think, looked at Diogenes, and Diogenes was laying on the road. He really was living almost like a beggar. And Alexander said, "Would you have me do anything for you?" And Diogenes said, "Yes. Get out of my shade, or get out of my way, basically. Move. I think I don't see the sun." Like the ruler of the free world, essentially back then, Alexander the Great really conquered everything. Was looked at by a simple man, simple beggar, and they said, "You have nothing to give me. What I have is worth more than all the civilizations you've conquered." And that is a piece of good sense. So pursue good sense today. Who knows what you're trying to build, trying to accomplish, and they're all good things. Don't get me wrong. Like the last video, I just said, do hard things, work hard. Put an effort into life. Don't shirk responsibility. I still stand by that. But all of that would be worth less than some good common sense. Because without good sense, what's all the work for? I wouldn't say there's a hierarchy, but I think, or I should say, I wouldn't know what a hierarchy of values would be besides what I think in my own worldview, which is Christianity. I would think, the good, the true, the beautiful, anything in Philippians 4:8. Think about such things. Those are virtues. And of course, the fruits of the Spirit, 10 Commandments. Um, all of that is my worldview, but um, what was I saying? That's what I'm not saying there's a hierarchy, or I'm not saying that I know if there's a hierarchy of certain values at this point, but I think good sense would come way up near the top because a lot of people are lacking it these days. You can kind of see it in the way people treat each other, and treat each other, treat themselves too. Um, there are people that don't live for a higher cause, and people that don't know what the meaning to their life is, and I think that's really sad. And if there is some, I think part of good sense is living for something higher than yourself, because you realize that there are things higher than yourself. I feel like I'm getting off track, but good sense. I think that's just a good. If something that I said sticks, and remember, then I hope it finds some value. If I said something that you find of value, I'm glad. But if I didn't, forget everything I just said. Forget everything I just said. and meditate on this quote. Just think about it. One piece of good sense would be more memorable than a monument as high as the moon. Just take that and think about it. Thank you for tuning in. Really glad you're here. I'll see y'all next time.